Today, my friends, we're going to work on the Right Stuff Detailing disc conversion kit for 2nd gen F bodies. Yay us! Hey guys, okay, so let's do this Right Stuff Detailing disc brake conversion kit. First things first, obviously I'm doing this off of the car because that's going to make my life a whole lot easier. If you're doing it on the car, good luck with that. Couple of things. Number one, make sure the rotors fit over the axle hubs. The rotors did not fit my axle hubs, so I had to have them machined out a little bit. It cost me like 30 bucks to do it, but now it fits flush like it's supposed to. That's first and foremost, check that. Now, before you put the axle hubs in, before you put the axles in, if you're going to use the disc brake backing plates, I painted mine because I thought I was going to use them and I didn't like the silver. Those have to go on first before you put the axles in because they mount to the face of the axle flange, okay? So if you're going to use those, make sure you put those on and then put the axles in. Seat the rotor on the axle, 2 lug nuts just to keep it nice and flush. And then comes the fun part. So you're going to have to take your caliper bracket, right? And what the instructions are going to tell you to do is to take the thickest spacer, which is about a 1/4 inch or something like that. So what they're going to tell you to do is to put that on first, right? So you put that spacer on. Make sure you're turning it the right way. Which I did not. I've already gone through all this. I've already mocked it up, so I know exactly what I need, so we can make our life a little bit faster and easier here. So you use that 1/4 inch spacer. You use the bracket itself, right? And then the machined edge here. Can you see that? There you go. The machined edge is what goes next to the axle face this way, right? Like this, so that way you can't really mess it up too much like I was just about to do, right? And then you run your bolts through. Now the next part would be to take your brake caliper. Aren't they beautiful? Take the brake caliper and set it on the back of the ears. Go on the back side of the bracket, okay? And then what you have to do is you have to figure out which of the spacers that comes with the kit you're actually going to need. There are 3 spacers, that big fat one, there's a medium size one, and then there's a really thin one. Because you got to make sure that the caliper is centered over the rotor, or at least so the outside disc brake pad fits, right? So that's where you have to start. Now, with mine, I'm not using stock axles. The problem that I ran into was these axles are about a 1/16 of an inch longer than the stock axles are. So, challenge is, even without this bracket, what I had to do, this still wouldn't, with just the caliper bracket on there, the challenge that I ran into was it still didn't push the caliper out enough to center over the rotor. So I actually had to have these milled a little bit to get it to fit so the caliper was centered. Now if you're using stock axles, use the 1/4 inch spacer, you know, use the 1/8 inch, the 1/16, whatever the case may be. So that's the fun part, is you gotta do not, let me make sure I point this out to you. Do not, before you get done with all this, while you're still testing it out, do not bolt this on super tight, right? Because of the way these nuts are made, that's what locks it into place. So you don't want to put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off. Just run the bolts through like this, hold it up. You can eyeball it, check it out, right? You can actually use a couple of clamps to hold it in place too if you want. So I already know I don't need any spacers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mount this bracket up, and then I'll show you what we have to do for the caliper next. Okay, a couple of little things here to point out. Number one, Yes, I painted my brackets. They're supposed to be, natural metal. I didn't like that, so I painted them black. The other thing is, when you're putting these on, when you're putting these bolts in, leave the rotor off, right? Makes a whole lot of sense, because then all you got to do, you can use a 9/16 socket on the head of the bolt, right? And then you use a 14 millimeter on the nut, and that way it's a whole lot easier than trying to wrestle with getting in behind the rotor and all that other good stuff. So now that I got that bolted up, take the rotor and we can put it on, put a couple of lug nuts on it to hold it in place. And then we're going to mount up the caliper, and I'm going to show you a couple of little tricks on what you should do for that caliper for getting it adjusted. Okay, so obviously you need to make sure that the brakes fit over top of the rotor, right? And so that it'll spin freely between those pads, right? Now, here's the thing. I'm gonna take, and I've already got these adjusted because I didn't want to waste your time while I was trying to figure it out, right? Here's what I want you to here's what I want you to know. The instructions and some of the stuff you'll find on the interwebs are gonna tell you that what you should do is take this bolt off, take the arm off, and then tighten the nut on the inside for that piston. Don't do it. You are playing with fire. I mentioned these in my last video when we were putting the axles in and whatnot. No, it was the one where I was talking about painting the calipers. Chris Craft has done a great video on these brake calipers. I'll put a link in the description. These are 79 to 85 Cadillac Eldorado calipers. Hardly anybody knows anything about them. The video by Chris does a great job. He tears it all apart. He shows you exactly how it works, how to put it back together, the whole 9 yards. The problem is, if you take this screw off here and this arm and everything, you're playing with fire because that piston will want to come out. And I've got one down there I can show you, but I'm not going to. I did it in the last video. You can look it up if you want. The easiest way to adjust these is with the face of the piston. You'll see all those little indentations in there. Chris mentions that there's a tool that you can get that you sit in there and you turn it, and what it'll do is it rotates that piston either into the housing or out towards the rotor, right? Now the challenge is sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I don't know. I just took his advice, and what I did was I just used a trusty pair of channel locks. Grab a hold of the housing, grab a hold of the piston itself, and then just rotate it, right? Just spin the piston. Now, obviously, if you rotate it clockwise, what that's going to do for you is that's going to tighten it up and push it in. If you rotate it counterclockwise, it loosens it up and pushes it out, okay? Now, and depending on how off yours is, you may have to adjust it a lot. Here's the thing you want to note is that on these, there may or may not be, actually there is, on the brake caliper itself, you'll notice there's a little knob right here, a raised area. That has to fit in one of these notches, right? So up here on the inside, you have to make sure that one of those is almost straight up and down for that knob to fit. Otherwise, the brake caliper won't sit flush against the piston face, and that's a bad thing, right? So anyway, so obviously I'm doing this opposite than I should if I was going to install it, but once you get your spring clip around there, hook the pad in, and then the outside pad on, and then like I say, you just want to make sure that it fits, right, and that it rotates freely. So adjust that caliper, adjust that piston in or out however much you need to get it so it fits like this, okay? So next thing we're going to do is we're going to mount up the caliper on the bracket, and then guess what? This side will be done. Another thing you'll notice is this is the left side. This is the driver's side of the car. The brake sits on the front. Okay, so the caliper sits on the front side of the rear end, facing the nose of the car on the driver's side. If you have staggered shocks, then the caliper is going to sit on the back side of the piston. They sit opposite of each other because of the shocks. So keep that in mind. So in the staggered shock kit, you get 2 of the identical brackets, you get 2 identical calipers. The little spacers, you'll get identicals of those, right? So you'll have 2 of everything for the staggered shock kit. So let me get this caliper mounted up and we'll be right back. Okay, so I got the caliper mounted up, got the pins in, got it all tightened up and everything. So this is important. I talked to guys at tech support previously about something else and they told me this, so I figured I'd pass it along to you, right? It's in the instructions, all right? But key point here. So you'll notice how it turns freely, right? Now, you need to adjust the parking brake. You need to adjust the emergency brake. Parking brake is what it is on the Camaro, right? Because it's not really an emergency brake, is it? Excuse me. You need to adjust that before you bleed the calipers, bleed the lines and everything and put juice to it, okay? So now, because this is obviously not on the car and I don't have the cables in or anything like that, I'm just going to do it manually by hand. So all you have to do is compress the spring, put your hand on top if it hurts your hand or something, and get you some gloves, whatever. And then the back side of the bracket. And so what you want to do is just compress it a few times, right? So what that does is it has a self-adjustment feature in the caliper. That's the way that this thing works. So you'll notice it still spins freely like it's supposed to, but once the brake is engaged, see there, it's locked into place, right? Okay, there we go. Passenger side all mounted up. You'll notice it's on the back side of the axle, right? Again, it's because of the staggered shocks. So it looks a little funny, you know, one caliper on one side, another caliper on the other. But you know, it's just the way that it is. Now, when you put your emergency brake cables in, the right side, the passenger side, is perfect because it just runs right straight in through the spring and connects in on the tab. On the driver's side, what has to happen, and we'll do this in another video, is the cable has to come around and then back in so it still works like it's supposed to. So once we get to that point, we'll see what it looks like. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to get this thing on the ground. So let's recap real quick. Right Stuff Detailing disc brake kit for early second gen Camaros, and actually I think it's for all second gen Camaros. Obviously I did the solid rotors and I did standard calipers because I wanted to paint them. You can get cross drilled and slotted rotors. You can get powder coated, black or red, whatever makes you happy. Again, I was just doing this, you know, this is, I mean, I'm doing everything as nice as I can, but it's still a budget build. That being said, I am getting stainless steel brake lines, right? I don't want to go back with OEM steel. But so for your disc kit, again, make sure you order the correct kit for your car, staggered shocks or not, cross-drilled, slotted, you know, powder coated, whatever it is you're looking for. So anyway, it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. Yay for progress on the 72 Retro mod. And we will see you for the next one. I'm not sure if I'm going to go ahead and install the brake lines first, or if we're going to go ahead and just put the rear end back in the car. Who knows? It'll be a surprise for both of us. So thanks again for watching. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn on the bell for notifications when new ones come up. Share with your friends. You know, that's what it's all about anyway. Helping each other figure all this stuff out. So, questions, challenges, comments, leave me a message. Happy to help any way that I can. You know, share whatever knowledge that I have, as limited as it may be. Thanks so much. We'll catch you next time.